When everything seems lost, listen to God's signs. There are moments in life when everything seems to suddenly collapse. It's as if everything you built, everything you believed was solid, dissolves right before your eyes. Plans fall apart, doors close, and the heart finds itself in front of a silence so deep it hurts. It's in that moment that the mind begins to scream, "Has God abandoned me? Does heaven no longer hear me?" That doubt eats away inside, because nothing seems to make sense. The weight of unanswered questions is more suffocating than the pain itself. You look around and find no way out, no direction, no sign. The world keeps spinning, but inside you, everything feels paralyzed. And it is at this breaking point, when the soul feels groundless, that the temptation arises to believe God has truly gone silent. Silence frightens us because humanity has learned to look for God's voice in thunder, in miracles, in quick answers. But what if the most powerful way God speaks is precisely through silence? What if the emptiness isn't absence but preparation? Imagine someone entering a theater before the play begins. The curtains are closed, the stage is dark, not a single word has been spoken. From the outside, it seems nothing is happening, but behind the curtain, every detail is being aligned, lights adjusted, actors positioned, instruments tuned. The audience doesn't see it, but preparation is in full motion. Silence, in this case, isn't abandonment, it's expectation. That's exactly what happens when everything seems lost. God's silence is not neglect, it is alignment. It's as if heaven is preparing something so precise that any premature word would ruin the plot. But the human mind, accustomed to immediacy, cannot tolerate waiting. That's why so many confuse silence with absence. Yet this silence has a hidden sound, an invisible echo that only those who learn to listen with the heart can hear. And it is in that echo that God whispers the most transformative answers. He doesn't need to prove his presence with noise, because his greatness is revealed precisely in what the world calls emptiness. If you feel alone, if your life seems like a dark stage without any movement, know that perhaps you're just in the most delicate part of preparation. Heaven has not gone quiet. It is aligning the backstage, adjusting the scenery, and writing an act that will only be revealed at the right time. The silence you fear may actually be the greatest sign that God is closer than ever, because only someone who loves deeply has the courage to speak through stillness. And it is precisely when the soul stops fighting against silence that it begins to realize there was always a voice behind it. The secret of the invisible human beings have been trained to believe only in what they see. From an early age, we learn to associate reality with what the eyes can capture, as if the invisible meant non-existent. But the truth is, God's greatest power is manifested precisely in what we cannot see. Think of the roots of a tree, buried, hidden, invisible to anyone passing by. From the outside, you only see the surface of the soil, a lifeless ground. Yet beneath it, in silence, there is intense movement, an expansion of life sustaining everything above. This is how God works. He operates in the invisible, in the underground of your story, moving pieces that appear motionless, opening paths not yet revealed, aligning encounters that will only make sense later. The problem is that anxiety makes us crave immediate proof. The mind cries out, "Show me now, God, let me see." But divine logic does not bow to human haste. God acts like the potter shaping the clay. He doesn't reveal the finished vessel while still moistening the clay, pressing the edges, spinning the wheel. Anyone watching mid-process might think there's no form, no sense, but the artist already envisions what doesn't yet exist. He sees the finished work even before the first trace. In the same way, the Creator looks at you and already sees the conclusion, even when your life seems like nothing but a heap of disconnected fragments. The key lies in the invisible. Because while you despair at the lack of results, God is weaving one thread after another, like someone embroidering from the reverse side. From here, all we see is a confusing tangle of knots, lines and marks with no apparent order. But on the other side, from God's perspective, there is already a perfect design. He only flips the fabric when the right time comes. The secret is to trust the invisible, to accept there is hidden engineering governing what looks like chaos. So when everything seems lost, maybe it's because what needs to be born is still beneath the soil. Maybe your tree is only in the root stage. It's not absence of life, but an excess of preparation. The invisible is not the end, it is the foundation. And if you have the courage to wait, you'll discover that this subterranean silence is the most powerful language God uses to build what no one can destroy. The language of coincidences. How many times have you called coincidence something that deep down felt full of meaning? An unexpected meeting, a random word spoken at the right moment, a song playing as an answer to your questions, a delay that made you cross paths with someone who changed your life. To logic, they are coincidences. To faith, they are signs. God rarely manifests himself in obvious ways. He prefers to hide messages within details, because only those who are attentive will perceive them. It's as if he leaves small breadcrumbs along the way, not to confuse you, but to guide you. Most people live so trapped in autopilot that they let this subtle language go unnoticed. They rush, distract themselves, drown in worries, not realizing heaven is speaking through tiny cracks. Every situation you called by chance may have been a divine code. The problem is, by looking only for grand signs, we overlook the small gestures that change everything. God can speak through a child asking an innocent question, a stranger crossing your path, or even an error that redirects you to a better route. Nothing is accidental when it comes to a Father who governs even the smallest details. Imagine life as a great book written by God. Each page carries a message, but many of us rush through without reading, then complain we don't understand the story. But those who stop, observe, and pay attention begin to decipher the language of coincidences. There is no coincidence when the Eternal is writing the plot. What looks like a delay may be deliverance. What feels like an error may be deliberate redirection. What hurts as loss may be repositioning. All of this forms a mysterious alphabet, revealed only to those willing to read between the lines. Perhaps the questions you carry today have already been answered, but so subtly you didn't notice. The invitation is simple. Open your eyes to the improbable. Stop dismissing the unexpected, because it is precisely in that terrain that God usually plants his greatest signs. The language of coincidences is divine, and when you begin to decipher it, you realize you were never walking alone. The weight that transforms. There is a language almost no one wants to learn, yet everyone eventually hears, the language of pain. Loss, frustration, failure, the tears no one sees. All of it becomes unbearable weight when carried without purpose. But when seen through the lens of faith, this weight ceases to be mere suffering and becomes a sacred language. God writes entire sentences using the syllables of pain. What you now call defeat may only be the introduction to a lesson that will completely change the way you see life. Pain is not punishment, it is construction. Imagine raw iron placed into the fire. It groans, expands, resists. But only by passing through the flames does it become malleable to be molded. If it remained cold forever, it would never become a sharp sword. The human soul is the same. It is in the heat of trials that resilience, clarity, and strength are born, things that could never exist otherwise. Without weight, there is no structure. Without pressure, there is no diamond. The problem is that the human heart longs to escape pain quickly. It begs for shortcuts, prays for it all to pass, yet God does not waste suffering. Every tear is used, every sleepless night is used, every silence is used. He lets nothing go to waste. The language of pain is mysterious but necessary because there are lessons that cannot be learned in comfort. It is in the valley that man discovers God's depth, in absence that he discovers true presence, in emptiness that he understands he was never alone. So the weight you carry today may be precisely the tool God is using to write the next chapter of your story. It is not punishment, it is code. It is not abandonment, it is refining. And if you have the courage to endure this weight while trusting the author, you will discover it didn't come to crush you, but to transform you into someone you could never be without this process. Pain is not the end of the story. It is only the secret language through which God prepares rebirth, the sound of the awakened heart. There is a constant noise dominating modern life. External voices, opinions, judgments, news, social pressures, and beyond them internal noise, racing thoughts, repetitive worries, memories that won't let go of the heart. This excess noise works like a radio station out of tune, where all you hear is static instead of music. And it is in this noisy chaos that most people try to find God's voice, not realizing heaven's frequency doesn't reveal itself in the mind's clamor, but in the awakened silence of the heart. Hearing God requires a different kind of attention. It's not about effort, but alignment. It's learning to quiet external voices and, above all, the internal screams, to perceive the whisper that has always been there. The heart has a sound that is not physical, but spiritual. It pulses with truths the mind cannot grasp. And when you learn to listen, you discover that many of God's signs never came from outside because they were always within you. The awakened heart is not naive, it is sensitive. It does not seek proof, it seeks resonance. It does not chase answers, it waits for revelation. It's like being in a room full of noise and suddenly finding a corner where the sound fades and the mind grows still. In that moment, what once seemed confusing becomes clear, and what felt distant becomes tangible. God speaks to those who dare to silence the world in order to listen inwardly. Many believe faith is about speaking, pleading, crying out endlessly. But there is a deeper faith, one not expressed in words, but in listening. It is trusting so deeply that you don't need to fill the emptiness with noise, only to make space for God to fill the silence with His voice. The sound of the awakened heart isn't audible to the ears, but it completely transforms how you see life. It is at that point the divine frequency becomes clear and the soul understands what the mind never could. The story of the hidden star. Imagine a traveler lost in the desert, alone, without compass, without maps, walking among dunes that all look the same. The scorching sun blinds him by day, and darkness swallows him by night. Every step feels pointless, because there is no reference, no direction. But at a certain moment, when the night feels most oppressive, he looks up and notices a single star shining in the sky. His broken compass, which he thought useless, had always pointed to the same place, and it was exactly that star. At first he thought it coincidence, until he realized that seemingly isolated light was the key to guide him out. This is not just a metaphor, it's how God acts when everything seems lost. Many times you wander in circles, believing life has completely lost direction. Your compass seems broken, your plans flawed, your choices meaningless. But there is always a hidden star, a reference that never fades, a constant light that remains even when everything else disappears. That star is God's sign, firm, immovable, waiting only for you to look up and notice. The problem is that in despair, we prefer looking down, counting grains of sand, measuring losses, focusing only on what makes us feel more defeated. The traveler only found direction when he looked up. That's the secret. Life doesn't gain meaning when you sink into the details of pain, but when you dare to fix your eyes above it. The broken compass, which seemed useless, became proof God had already left a path prepared. In the same way, the situations you call failures may not be mistakes, but disguised compasses pointing to a direction you'll only understand later. The desert was not punishment. It was a classroom. The darkness was not God's absence. It was the perfect backdrop for the star to shine even brighter. The broken compass was not failure. It was providence. Everything, absolutely everything, was part of a greater plot. The traveler's life changed when he realized the star had never truly been hidden. It was he who had not yet learned to lift his eyes. The mirror of the dark night always frightens because it robs us of sight. Human beings fear what they cannot see, fear the invisible, fear the absence of clarity. Yet the dark night is not merely absence of light. It is also a mirror. It is in darkness that the eyes adapt and begin to distinguish points that daylight would conceal. The stars, for example, are always there, but only become visible when the sky is covered in darkness. In the same way, there are signs of God that only reveal themselves in the night of the soul, when everything around seems extinguished. When life plunges into shadows, you discover aspects of yourself you would never have known in the full light. The night forces you to slow down, to seek another kind of guidance. It's then that faith stops being theory and becomes practice. While the sun shines, trust feels obvious, but when darkness comes, the heart must learn to see. God uses the dark night as a mirror to reveal what was hidden, both within you and around you. And then we understand. Darkness is not the enemy, it is the stage of revelation. The curious thing is, the denser the night, the stronger the perception of small lights. A flame invisible in broad daylight becomes a powerful beacon in the darkness. So it is with God's presence. When everything seems lost, when certainties vanish and supports collapse, the smallest spark of faith gains immeasurable value. It's as if heaven whispers, "Now you are ready to see what you once ignored." The dark night is therefore an invitation to stop fighting against the darkness and start asking what it wants to show you. Fear is born when we think night is punishment, but faith is born when we realize it is a mirror. And when you dare to face yourself in this mirror, the soul perceives it is not alone, because even in the absence of light, there is a presence that never goes out. The breath in the conscience. Many times you believe sudden thoughts are just your imagination, an idea that appears out of nowhere, a feeling that refuses to leave, a dream more vivid than the day you lived. But what if these invisible movements aren't merely products of the mind, but subtle breaths of God? He breathes into human consciousness so delicately that many confuse it with chance, when in truth it is direction. The breath in the conscience is that unease that won't let you continue on the same path, even when everything around says you should. It is the peace that comes the moment you choose what once seemed impossible. It is the sudden clarity that emerges in the midst of confusion, as if a curtain were drawn back and truth revealed itself before your eyes. This breath is not logical, not calculated, not born of reasoning. It is like an unexpected wind shifting the sails and carrying the boat into safe waters. The great challenge is that, accustomed to rationalizing everything, humans try to explain what cannot be explained. The mind questions, is this really from God or just my thoughts? But the awakened conscience knows the difference. What comes from God does not bring panic, it brings clarity. It does not confuse, it illuminates. It does not weigh, it directs. It's as if the heart knew before the mind could accept. This breath can come in many forms, a dream that insists on repeating, a memory that appears at the wrong time, a sudden thought that refuses to leave, an intuition so strong it seems to shout in silence. It is the divine breath intertwining with your own, reminding you that you are not alone. The breath in the conscience is more than a sign. It is God Himself touching your soul to pull it out of inertia and set it in motion. The call that echoes in the desert. The desert is the place where silence becomes deafening. No distractions, no crowds, no comfort of routine, only emptiness, solitude, and the weight of existence itself. It's in this landscape that human beings feel most vulnerable, because nothing external sustains them. Yet it is also in the desert that God's voice reveals itself most powerfully, not as a thunderous shout, but as a call echoing deep within the soul. The desert is pedagogical. It strips away excess so you learn to value the essential. It's when food is scarce that you understand true hunger, when water is absent that you recognize the value of a drop, when human support disappears that you learn to depend on something greater. In the desert there's no pretending, no masks, no distractions. Only you, your soul, and God's call. It's as if He waits for everything else to go silent to finally speak clearly. Many try to flee the desert, but what looks like punishment is actually training. The greatest encounters with the divine in human history happened in deserts, whether geographic or spiritual, because it is in that emptiness that faith ceases to be theory and becomes survival. The call that echoes in the desert is not just an invitation, it is a dividing line. Either you hear and follow, or you get lost in your own silence. When everything seems lost, maybe it's because you're crossing your personal desert. And if the silence bothers you so much, it's because it carries a hidden sound not yet deciphered. The great question is, will you keep seeing the desert as abandonment, or will you begin to hear it as a call? The divine turning point. There comes a moment when everything shifts. What seemed defeat becomes a starting point. What seemed silence is revealed as an answer. What seemed abandonment turns out to be proof of care. This turning point doesn't come as a spectacle visible to the world, but as an inner awakening that completely changes how you see your story. It's when you realize every detail, every tear, every weight, every apparent delay was actually weaving the beginning of something greater. The divine turning point is not the end of pain, it is its redefinition.